Alright guys, 2008 Ford Escape. This is my wife's car. Her check engine light has come on. I'm going to run through some diagnosis on this real quick. This is using my Ford IDS unit. This is my personal device. Okay, so one of the things I was waiting for initially is down here in this corner. You see this little icon of the VCM. You can't really do anything until that appears. So when you're using the IDS, make sure you get everything plugged in and wait for that to appear before you try to run diagnosis. So let's start a new session. Let's get into this real quick. It says make our connections. It is identifying the vehicle. Takes just a second to establish communication. And same VIN was found because I checked this out earlier a couple days ago. So we'll restore that session. Normally you'd go through and let it do its thing. It identifies it and it'd come up with a screen. It says okay. Alright, so we're good to go here. Alright, so with the Ford IDS, almost everything that you do on this is going to be out of this little toolbox icon right up here in the top left corner. So we're going to click on that. First thing we want to do is we want to run a self-test. See what the codes are, because again, check engine lights on, so we'll run self-test. This case, it's a powertrain, engine, and I have the option of a key on, engine off, a key on, engine running, or just receive continuous memory diagnostic trouble codes. A lot of times you will just go for this retrieve. I'm always a fan of this is an on-demand test. It'll tell you if you have any on-demand faults right now. So I always like running that. The engine running test is actually doing it running, which is an even more in-depth active test, and it works even better, gives you a little more information. So I'm going to go ahead and get this on-demand test running. Okay, we got to hit the check mark here. So again, if you could hear what's going on in the car when this starts, is I'll hear different solenoids buzzing, different like the cooling fan will kick on, things like that. Basically it's going through and it's testing some of its inputs and outputs and saying, are they in normal operating conditions right now? I can tell that I've had the key on a little too long. The battery voltage indicator turned a little red right down here when the cooling fan kicked on. I just heard it kick on and kick back out. Ooh, it's got a second code. So the on-demand test, it says right now it doesn't pick up anything that's a hard fault. That says pass. No DTCs present. Continuous memory codes. We show an Evap system, a very small leak. And let's see what this code is. Oxygen sensor signal stuck lean, bank 1 sensor 2. That's a new one. It didn't have that the other day. And of course it shows them down here as pending codes too. So again, a pending code means it's seen the fault once. When it transfers up here to the continuous memory, which again this is continuous memory, then that means it's seen the problem at least twice. So the fault that I got the other day was just this one that says Evap very small leak detected. Suspect fuel filler cap. Gives you some different possible causes here. Okay, so with that, on the Ford IDS, there's a really cool test for the Evap system. I'm going to jump to that. I might have to check this one out too. Oxygen sensor, bank 1 sensor 2 stuck lean. That's a new code that I hadn't seen yet. It could possibly be related, but more than likely it's not. So let's go back over here to the toolbox. Now, this test is a test that's unique to Ford. Anytime I get an Evap small leak, Ford built this really cool Evap test into their diagnostic scan tool. This is basically, it goes through and it runs the test kind of as if it were driving down the road and it was actually running the Evap monitor. It runs the same basic test, but does it just in a shop bay, or in this case in my driveway, or wherever you're at. So let's get this one going, and I'll show you this one real quick. Give you a good quick explanation of what it's doing while it's doing it. Alright. Fuel level is supposed to be, we're sitting just above a quarter tank, so we should be good there. Preferred 75%, it's just above a quarter, so it should work. Let's click this. Apply the park brake, ensure the vehicle's running, turn off the AC, defrost, headlamps, all of that. Press stick to continue. Will not be able to perform intended operation. What? Alright. Evap system test. And so we start with the engine not running. It's looking for atmospheric pressure here, so it just opens the system, make sure it's open to atmosphere. There's no issues there. It's kind of basically establishing what is atmospheric pressure. So it catches atmospheric pressure and says, okay, this gives me a starting reference point. It wants me to select the fuel tank size. This one has a small tank on it, so we're going to leave it there. Start the engine. Alright, so the engine's started and running. Hopefully that doesn't add too much noise to this. Alternator's working because the voltage just turned green. Let the RPMs come down just a little bit. Okay, let's start the test. So it says waiting for the engine to stabilize. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to watch this run this test. And what's going to happen is we're going to see it close the vent valve, which the vent valve is near the tank. It basically blocks off the fresh air vent. Then it's going to start opening the canister purge valve, which is the one that's attached to the engine, and then it's going to pull a vacuum on the tank. Once it achieves that vacuum level, then it will shut the system down and see if it'll hold the vacuum. So what we see it doing now, the RPMs, usually it'll adjust, but this was cold, so it's already adjusted. So we have the canister purge is sitting at 26%. The vent valve is commanded to 100%, which means it just closed the vent valve. The canister purge is starting to duty cycle up a little bit, and you see it starting to pull a vacuum. We're seeing the pressure starting to change on the fuel tank. So again, what it tries to do is it tries to pull the vacuum down to a certain point. Then it has to maintain that vacuum for a calibrated amount of time, and then it releases the vent valve and opens it back to atmosphere, and it expects it to jump back to atmospheric pressure relatively quickly. Now we see that it's duty cycled that up a little higher. The vacuum's starting to drop pretty rapidly, pulling a vacuum on the tank. And alright, so now it's achieved the vacuum level that it wants, so the canister purge valve closes. It actually shut the engine down for me. You'll notice that the canister vent valve is still commanded 100%. Anytime it's 100%, that's the computer commanding it closed. Canister vent valve is a normally open valve. Canister purge valve is normally closed. Canister purge valve, being a 0%, means it's closed. It is not commanded on at all. Canister vent valve, if it were a 0, it would be wide open, and basically it would be allowing atmosphere to vent in and out of the tank. If the pressure builds up in the tank, it allows it to kind of vent outward. If it's cold and everything's cooling off and it needs to pull a little bit of air into the tank so it doesn't collapse it that way. Obviously it passed. So you see that this changed to 0% and it vented rather rapidly, which actually right now this is saying everything passed. Let's set the ignition off. And this is saying that the test passed, which when I saw this code the other day, I kind of checked the gas cap and messed with it a little bit. It wasn't real tight, but she's driven it a few times, so I'm surprised the light hasn't already went off. Alright, so let me run this again. Come on. Come on, move faster. Well, let me do it this way. Exit. Okay, I'm going to run the test again just so that we can see that one more time. Plus, I want to verify. So we're going to click Evap test. Turn the key on. Get the chime binging. Make sure everything's off. Not sure why it's throwing this one either. Okay, Evap system test. So again, canister vent valve, CV. It's at 0%, which means it's turned off. Canister vent valve is normally open, so when it's off, it's open to atmosphere. Canister purge valve was actually sitting at 100%, which means they were actually opening that too. 100% on the canister purge valve means it's wide open basically to the engine, which I hadn't noticed it doing that before. Again, small tank, so we're going to run that. Start the engine. It's waiting to stabilize. Okay, so again, canister vent valve, when it's off, it's open, which means air can pass both ways. As fuel is expanding, as things are heating up, it lets air out. As the fuel and everything is contracting, it can pull air in, so air can go either way. Canister purge valve is normally closed, so when it's off, it's closed. It does not let any flow between the fuel tank into the engine to the intake manifold. So again, we see the vent valve has commanded 100%, which means it is 100% closed, which means it's closed off completely right now. Canister purge valve, again, now is showing 26%. We see the vacuum number starting to change here. The little line on the line graph is going to start to move as this is commanded up at a duty cycled percentage. You can actually watch the voltage over here too. We can watch the voltage change on the fuel tank pressure sensor. So this is a sensor that's kind of like a map sensor type sensor. It's sensing pressure. It's waiting for a change. And as the vacuum is being pulled, you notice the number here starts to drop. the voltage number is changing. Okay, so again, as this gets commanded at a higher rate, we see that that drops fairly quickly. So it has to pull a vacuum down to a calibrated level. It's hit that level. So it killed the engine again. Canister vent valve still at 100%, which means it's 100% off. The canister purge valve is at 100%, which means it's commanded 100% on. It's completely shut. No air can travel in or out. Canister purge valve is at 0%, which means, again, it's completely closed. So now the fuel tank system is completely closed off. It can't let any air in or out, and what it's doing is it's monitoring for a leak. And so we're watching this number. If this number doesn't drop very much, which it appears not to be dropping, it's holding up pretty good. And what you'll see, if it hits it to its liking, this will drop to 0%. It wants to see that number drop rapidly, so there it went, 0%. When it quickly jumps back up to atmospheric pressure, that means that the canister vent, or the canister, can actually pass air through it relatively easy. So that is a functioning evap system right now. Turn the key off. So test passed again, which again I'm surprised that, because it's passing, leak size is within specifications. It says it is in the allowable range. So it check engine light should have went off. Like I said, I did notice the gas cap on this thing was not very tight. When my wife said the light came on, and I messed with it a little bit, and now it's passing. So it is it's an aftermarket gas cap, kind of a cheesy gas cap. I've never really liked it, but that's what was on it, and told my wife I'd get her a new one. She said, no, it works, it's fine. So I never have bothered.
Okay, so as a quick wrap up on this, again, my wife's Escape had a check engine light, had an Evap small leak detected code P0456. We checked the codes. We went in, we did the self-test, we checked the codes. Had that code, had an oxygen sensor code. I would probably go in normally to the data logger, which again, that just displays live data. Probably go in and monitor that oxygen sensor, see if everything's working okay. Beyond that, what we did do is we did the evap test, and I showed you that. It was kind of cool. Shows you the whole process of what it would do while it was driving down the road. Open atmosphere, pulling a vacuum on the tank, maintaining that vacuum, and then can it bleed that vacuum off at a fairly quick rate. So at this point, normally what I would do, it didn't appear to have an evap leak. I would probably go in and monitor the oxygen sensor, make sure that it's switching back and forth like it should, or actually that one should be fairly flatline. If the oxygen sensor appeared good, I would probably just go ahead and clear the codes out and release this back to the customer, which in this case is my wife. So that would mean me walking back in and handing the keys back to my wife and tell her everything's good. So I will clear the codes, but anyways, so I hope this is all a good learning experience for you.